inspiration strikes, WillowTree teams dive into the industries that impact our lives. Airlines, banks, big box retailers. And we carve out a tight 2 weeks to rapid prototype a new set of digital tools we think they'll love. Whether iterating on an already positive experience or reimagining the customer journey from scratch, we race a rapidly closing window to take what's good and make it better.
Welcome to 2 Weeks to Better. We are live in New York with our favorite tech partners, Braze. And this week, we're going to revolutionize the entire digital sports experience. Everything from how you stream across multiple platforms to how you purchase tickets to live events. We have a rockstar team ready to win a championship with their innovation. We have what I think is going to be a really fun problem on our hands, which is how do we make the sports viewing experience better? Let's reduce the noise. Let's figure out how to get cleaner messages to our fans, how to engage them, how to drive revenue from those fans, of course, make more valuable segments, and just make this better. But Nick, I'm curious what kinds of problems you're seeing in this space and how you think Braze is helping or could be helping.
Whether it is something like engaging you in stadium with content or serving you notifications after, maybe for a player who absolutely went off that night, go buy their jersey.
A lot of times when I'm downloading a new app, I'm bombarded with all of these requests, right? You know, can I have access to your location? And can you opt in for push notifications? And it's all happening at the same time. You can be overwhelmed and you can just disengage and say, no, not now. And you know, brands lose that opportunity to capture that rich information on me as a user.
Yeah, I think it's all about finding the right touch point. I think what the real challenge is, though, is thinking about, you know, when you're at the stadium and let's say someone that hasn't used your network app in a while, how do you bring a unique experience to remind them that that thing is valuable in their phone? How do you kind of offer something specialized to them that's going to give them a benefit while they're actually at that contextual experience of being in the stadium, for example, without trying to tell them just like, hey, watch online, something that's totally useless to them.
The adoption rate for apps is fairly abysmal across the board. So we really need to stand out early and make sure we create that personalized sense. So something like a content card might be a great way to get some early preferences. But then how do we also leverage a platform that's so flexible to be able to bring some creative content? Maybe we can do language differently, or we can think about how we do fan takeovers or athlete takeovers of different accounts. I'm excited to see how you guys even handle journey mapping, because there are just so many different choices a sports fan can make over time. I think you're going to have your work cut out for you just in that, but I'm excited to see how you guys handle the challenge, how you think about the tech requirements, and how you think about the creative opportunity that comes with it.
Not having any constraints is great, but we still want to make sure that we're prioritizing a set of ideas that we think are going to drive the most impact. So I think that's really the first step.
Going to Madison Square Garden felt surreal, and going there with the intent of doing field research is completely different than just going there as a fan. One huge opportunity, they take a lot of breaks. When you're at home, you get commercials. When you're in a venue, it gets a bit boring. What is a great way to engage fans while they're waiting? So gamifying the whole experience to kind of keep people engaged. And we can use that as a hook to drive people to download our apps.
So when you think about audience discovery as the first phase, complex journey mapping for each of those target audiences that we choose to prioritize, and then moving on to actual creative and ideation where you're brainstorming on messaging strategy, design, imagery, and then of course packaging all of that together to share with the client. That entire process, that takes time. In any client engagement, we have that luxury of time where we can really dedicate the amount of effort and space that we need to each of these phases of the process. You know, for this, we had 2 weeks, right? So we're more doing audience discovery actually in the span of hours, and for all of the other phases of the process as well. So the 4 user segments that we targeted for this project, the first was hardcore fans. Think of these as your fans that are most engaged. These are your diehards. The second was casual fans. These are fans that aren't as engaged during the regular season, but they do tune in for major events like playoffs. The third is new fans. So as it says in the name, these are fans that are potentially new to the sport. So we want to think about ways that we can activate early engagement from them. The fourth is dormant fans. So these are fans that may have engaged at one point but have recently lapsed or disengaged, but there is still a potential for them to jump back in.
What we do on client engagements when we attack these problems is we think about, okay, what is the technical lift associated with this? What is the potential return on revenue? And which segment is this going to target? And we actually have a matrix where we chart out these ideas and then we see, okay, what is the lowest hanging fruit that we can attack first? Or maybe we choose one of the higher technical lift concepts that has a really high ROI potential.
So the first area of focus that we drilled into was the onboarding experience. We wanted to start with this concept of a preference center. What are your favorite sports, as well as what are your favorite teams? And then within that, giving users the ability to customize their experience within either their sports or their team layer, allowing them to customize their notifications as well as their email subscriptions. From there, we have the ability to layer in and customize additional messaging to capture the needed information to actually deliver on that experience.
Users are willing to grant additional access to their data in exchange for something that they think of as valuable. You need to leverage data to understand what are folks saying they're interested in versus what are they actually doing, and how do we leverage that data to then deliver content to them that's relevant, even if they didn't raise their hand for a particular item or items.
What I love here is you're optimizing for a great in-app experience to change those preferences. When that preference changes, you have no way to really say, I'm actually not interested in this anymore. This solves that challenge and gives that sense of autonomy and control back to the fan themselves.
How we can get content messaging, when we're sending it, what we're sending, how we're powering personalization from those preferences that Alyssa walked us through. You give them a reminder that says, hey, playoff games 1 versus Eagles is starting, would you like to mute notifications? There are different sort of alerts in a robust preference center that you can opt in, opt out per game. That setting gets saved, but also you're saving the risk of a global opt-out.
There's obviously a lot of consistency in terms of when games actually start. And so to your hardcore fan, they're gonna know that. Right. And so like, again, is listening to that cue and again, offering them some type of consideration that, hey, we understand that you're gonna most likely be watching this game. How do we again is make that the best experience by potentially turning off notifications? So it's again, a very considerate way to again, drive engagement by really listening to your fans.
For many sports, there's a lot of matches or games occurring on a single day. Yeah. It might be fun to have a version of this that's full screen with multiple toggle that has every college football game that day, where you can say, do you want alerts? Do you want spoilers? And just let them toggle through.
How can we maximize the usage of Braze and leverage content cards to deliver on that experience?
Athletes who maybe are very public about their stories, their backgrounds, their personal interests tend to be very resonant with the end user. So part of what we envisioned here is specific athlete profiles that go a little bit more in depth than kind of the standard roster information that you might see on a team's website. There might be specific highlight reels for that individual player. You might have their walk-up song if they're a baseball player that can be integrated into Spotify. You also might have their social media, their Twitter, their Instagram linked on top. You can also give them merch that is for that specific athlete to make a purchase in-app. We know that users spend a lot of time kind of scrolling through merch, getting non-personalized merch offers. So this is an area where we can, again, really double down on their interest in that athlete. Use search trends, use data that's optimized for SEO to target new fans. There's a lot of just kind of like curiosity among new fans for that kind of information, but there's not really a lot of brands who are serving that up to users and enabling that as a way to empower them to get a better understanding of the sports experience.
People love characters, they love a hero.
It kind of adds a different layer to the game, right? You can kind of find out what's he eat, what's his diet, what's his workout, how's he warm up.
We talk to our clients a lot about automation and making things more programmatic. So like, where are you storing this information? How are you capturing it? How do you move from like a manual process to a more automated process that sort of fits into this sort of character-driven idea, but that's automated and uses things like content cards, connected content, and more programmatic ways of engaging with consumers that's both personal and relevant, but doesn't require too much manual lift because it's hard to do something like this at scale. So what are ways in which we can build a data backend with partners like WillowTree that enables us to then deliver the front end where you're delivering that same sort of strategy, but through something that's not just going player by player, piece by piece.
Bringing those diehard fans to the bleachers, right?
Maybe you go to Yankee Stadium all the time, or this could be a super infrequent experience. Maybe you can go to one football game per season. So really thinking about how do we create this delightful experience when folks are in the stadium, and that really starts before they get there. So they need super differentiated information depending on how often they go. Fans may have a lot of friction around what is the right train to take there, how early do I need to leave, what is the parking situation, what is going to be the easiest way for me to get there. So here the strategy is to leverage content blocks and liquid logic to provide that unique experience to each fan in a pregame email. So travel tips and tricks for these first-time attendees, maybe linking out to the website and having some tips for folks for how to get there. Maybe if it's their second time, having a welcome back and maybe including some additional fun, delightful content like the walk-up songs playlist. That's something I get really excited about as a fan. Leveraging Braze's connected content, for example, with AccuWeather partnership and offering merch that's appropriate for the weather. And then really also knowing when not to send this email. So if fans are going to the Yankee game, more than 2 times in a season, this is not an email really that they need to be receiving. We don't want to be sending this to a fan 15, 20, 30 times a season. This is an opportunity where less is more and we need to go ahead and suppress that email.
That becomes really interesting. Batting practice, or you want to get to the gates to a certain amount of time so you get that promotional opportunity, or obviously tailgating, or all the other elements that happen inherently around sport.
There's a lot of cognitive lift that goes into just showing up to that event and fully enjoying it. And there's so many things the digital experience could be doing better to complement that, starting with just being aware that fans are at this live event. I think today the bar is just very low where so many brands don't seem to differentiate who's holding a very expensive ticket in their hand and who's going to be watching from their couch.
Lastly, I think, Billy, just getting at what you were saying, really keeping the focus on the field while you're at the game, right? So welcoming the fan to the stadium, saying, hey, in your app you have your seat map, your merch offers, your player stats, all of the things you're going to need, really driving awareness of what is the companion experience that's available to you, but then really keeping the focus on the field and not messaging that fan and treating them differently than if they're watching at home.
Fantastic job. WillowTree has such a pronounced understanding of the Braze sophistication within the platform itself. And so really the augmentation of how you work the channels together as opposed to in isolation was really, really interesting. And whether it was like integrating content cards or push notifications or email and bringing those channels together in an orchestrated way was really interesting.
This was super fun. I love the presentation.
I think these ideas are really going to push the experience. And I love that a lot of what we did was think about how to subtract, how to create less noise, and make sure that we're just consistently relevant to what any given fan might need. And how do we take the individual nuances of the sport that they care about, of the experience that they're having into account with every form of engagement.
I think so often what we see when we hear about loyalty campaigns or engagement campaigns or even big creative is it's a lot of ideas that aren't actually possible to create in real life and to implement. And everything we explored this week is so abundantly possible. We could do it now. We could do it with relatively minimal investment on the engineering side. We can do it with the tools that we have at hand.
Devices and the platforms that they use to watch their favorite sporting experiences are just as interconnected, seamless, and deliver that same sense of connectedness that they feel when they watch their favorite sport or watch their favorite player. And we've always known it to be true that when there's a better, a faster, an easier way to do something, the old way of doing things simply fades into the background. And I'm confident, the team is confident, that we have delivered on those user expectations and those fan expectations in what we've created with WillowTree Sports Network.